I am sitting here looking at a piece of footage that has been circulating among Western military analysts for the past 48 hours. It is not an explosion. It is not a battlefield panorama. It is a single, uncut video clip, approximately 11 seconds long, filmed from inside a drone. The drone descends at a controlled angle. The target below it is not a building or a radar installation. It is the top hatch of a Merkava Mark IV main battle tank, the most protected armored vehicle in the Israeli Defense Forces. The drone hits it. The clip ends. That footage is not Iranian propaganda. It was released through Hezbollah's official Telegram channel on April 5th. Israeli broadcaster Kan confirmed its authenticity. A senior IDF official, speaking directly to the war zone, acknowledged that these attacks show, in his words, genuine strike capability and that some hits are probably real. Now, here is what I need you to understand, because this is the part the mainstream media is not explaining correctly. That 11-second clip is not the story. That single tank is not the story. The story is what that clip tells us about the state of the most technically sophisticated armored formation Israel has ever deployed into combat, and why the system that was supposed to make that tank untouchable has been exposed in open engagement in front of the entire world. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what is happening to the IDF's armored divisions in southern Lebanon. Not the headlines, not the claim and counterclaim, the operational reality. Why the Merkava, the tank designed specifically to protect Israeli crews from every known anti-armor threat, is now facing a weapon it was not engineered to defeat. Why the Trophy Active Protection System, the system Israel spent decades developing and which stopped incoming missiles on multiple engagements, cannot intercept what is coming at these tanks from above. And why the consequences of what is unfolding right now in the kill corridors south of the Litani River will determine whether this war ends in negotiation or catastrophic escalation. Subscribe now if you are watching this and want to understand what is actually driving the panic in Tel Aviv. This is the analysis you are not getting anywhere else. Turn on notifications. You are going to need every update on this one. Let's start with what the IDF actually deployed, because the composition matters. Since Israel launched its ground invasion of southern Lebanon on March 16th, it has committed 5 full divisions to the Lebanese theater: the 36th Armored Division, the 91st Territorial Division, the 146th Division, the 162nd Armored Division, and deployed on April 7th, the 98th Division as a reinforcement. 5 divisions, the largest Israeli ground force committed to Lebanon since 1982. The 36th Division, in particular, operates the IDF's most advanced armored platforms. Its core formation is the 7th Armored Brigade, the 77th Battalion, equipped with Merkava Mark IV tanks and Namer heavy infantry fighting vehicles. These are not legacy platforms. The Merkava Mark IV costs approximately $3.5 million per unit. The Trophy Active Protection System mounted on each of them costs another $350,000 per installation. Israel designed this combination specifically to be impenetrable in the threat environment of Lebanon and Gaza. That was the assessment, that was the doctrine. That doctrine is now under direct, observable, documented pressure. Subscribe if you are realizing that what you are about to hear is not being reported this way anywhere else. Daily Brief exists for exactly this moment. Received. Let me walk you through announcement number 1, because this is where the picture starts to change. The Trophy Active Protection System was designed to intercept incoming anti-tank guided missiles. It uses a radar array to detect projectiles, calculates an intercept solution in milliseconds, and fires small explosive charges that shatter the incoming warhead before it reaches the vehicle. Against the Cornet-E laser-guided missile. Against the Delavia, Iran's domestically produced reverse-engineered copy of the Israeli Spike. Against virtually every ATGM in Hezbollah's arsenal that Trophy was designed to stop, it works. There is confirmed footage of Trophy engaging and defeating incoming Cornet missiles in Lebanon and Gaza. The system saved lives, the system performed, the system is real, but here is the constraint that Trophy's designers did not fully solve. Trophy was built to engage threats arriving in a relatively flat line-of-sight trajectory. It was not built to intercept small, low-mass drones diving vertically onto a vehicle's top hatch from directly above. The physics of the intercept geometry are different. The radar signature of a 500-gram FPV drone is fundamentally different from a Cornet missile. The angular approach profile is fundamentally different. A senior IDF official confirmed to the war zone directly that the fiber optic FPV drones being used by Hezbollah in Lebanon create a credible and growing technical threat that Trophy was not specifically engineered to stop. He said that, not Hezbollah, not Iranian state media. The Israeli military said it. That statement does not receive the attention it deserves. And there is a reason. Acknowledging it fully would require acknowledging that the system the IDF built its entire armored doctrine around has a detectable vulnerability that an adversary has already found and is already exploiting. Received. That is announcement number 1. Now, let me walk you through announcement number 2, because the FPV drone is only one layer of what Hezbollah is deploying against Israeli armor. And this second layer is the one that produced the most alarming single-day loss report in the IDF's armored history in more than 40 years. On March 26th, in ambushes concentrated along two axes in the Tebe-Kantara corridor in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah claimed to have destroyed 21 Merkava tanks in a 24-hour period. Let me be precise about what is confirmed here. Hezbollah published claims. Those claims are disputed by the IDF, which has stated that Hezbollah's casualty figures are exaggerated. Israeli military spokesperson Ella Wawiya called them completely false. The IDF acknowledges that multiple Merkavas were disabled or destroyed, but disputes the total figure. Defense Security Asia, drawing on convergent open source analysis and visual evidence from combat footage released between March 22 and 26, assessed that between 75 and 100 Merkava tanks had experienced some level of damage or disablement across the operational period. That figure has not been independently confirmed. What has been confirmed is this. The IDF's operational update for March 26 references several soldiers of the 7th Brigade sustaining injuries, one of whom was killed. The 7th Brigade is an armored brigade. It operates Merkava Mark IVs. The IDF does not dispute that the engagement occurred. What is not in dispute, and this is the operational fact that matters, is that Hezbollah executed a deliberate, pre-planned ambush structure against an Israeli armored advance in the Taiba Deir Syrian corridor, deploying layered anti-tank guided missile teams, Iranian-supplied Almaz missiles following a lofted top-attack trajectory that bypasses Trophy's primary engagement envelope, and FPV drones operating simultaneously against recovery vehicles and reinforcements. A top attack trajectory means the missile approaches from above at a steep angle, targeting the thinner armor on the roof of the tank, which Trophy was not designed to defeat with the same efficiency as a direct approach projectile. Hezbollah has these missiles. Iran supplied them, and on March 26 they were used in a coordinated manner against the IDF's most advanced armored brigade. That is not speculation. That is the documented operational record. Received. That is announcement number 2. Now let me walk you through announcement number 3. Because what happened on April 14th represents a qualitative escalation beyond anything that has occurred on the Lebanese front since this war began. And it is the development that has the IDF's electronic warfare planners in a level of operational distress that they have not publicly acknowledged. On the morning of April 14th, Hezbollah launched at least 40 drones toward northern Israel. Israel's own public broadcaster, CAN, reported the following. Among those 40 drones was a system that Hezbollah had never previously deployed in combat. A drone equipped with an optical guidance system, not a GPS system, not a radio-controlled system, not a fiber optic cable system, an optical system, meaning the drone locks onto and tracks its target visually, using an internal camera and processing unit to navigate to impact. CAN reported that this system is resistant to electronic warfare, that it can maneuver inside buildings, that it can carry up to 5 kilograms of explosives, that it can travel tens of kilometers. CAN reported that only a small number of the 40 drones launched that day were intercepted, while the rest struck their targets and caused heavy damage. Now, understand what this means operationally. The Israeli military's primary defense against drone attack is electronic warfare, jamming the radio signal that connects the drone to its operator and rendering it uncontrollable. Against fiber optic drones, that jamming fails because the signal travels through a cable, not wirelessly. Against GPS-guided systems, jamming the GPS frequency works. Against an optical guidance system, jamming does not work because the drone is not navigating by signal. It is navigating by sight. It sees the target, it guides itself to the target. There is no radio frequency to jam. There is no GPS lock to spoof. The drone's guidance system is entirely internal. This is not a theoretical vulnerability. This is a confirmed operational deployment by Hezbollah on April 14, 2026, reported by Israeli state media. The system has already been used. The countermeasure does not currently exist in deployed Israeli inventory, and Hezbollah has announced it will use it again. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let me talk about what is really happening behind the headlines. Because there are 2 stories being told about this conflict simultaneously. The first story is the one that Tel Aviv wants told. That story goes like this. The IDF has killed approximately 1,400 Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon since March 10th. The IDF has conducted more than 7,000 drone, missile, and airstrikes targeting Hezbollah. The IDF has pushed into and effectively encircled Bint Jbeil, the symbolic capital of Hezbollah's resistance narrative in southern Lebanon. The battle there is going well. In the coming days, there will be no major fights left in the area. That is the version the IDF is presenting. Then, there is the second story. The one that the operational footage, the confirmed casualty reports, the IDF's own statements, and the pattern of engagements tell. In that story, the IDF has committed 5 full divisions, its entire southern reserve, to a ground campaign in Lebanon while simultaneously fighting a 47-day war with Iran, managing drone and missile threats against Israeli territory from Hezbollah, and trying to maintain a ceasefire with Iran that its own government has publicly undermined. In that story, the 7th Armored Brigade's most advanced tanks have been struck by a weapon their protection system was not built to stop. In that story, a new drone guidance technology was deployed on April 14th that renders Israel's primary drone countermeasure ineffective. In that story, Hezbollah claims to have destroyed 136 Merkava tanks and 26 additional military vehicles across the operational period. The IDF disputes this figure, but the IDF will not publish its own losses. Nobody disputes that Hezbollah's operational capacity after the April 7th ceasefire with Iran is intact, reconstituted, and technologically upgraded. That second story is the one that actually determines how this ends. Now here is the part that nobody wants to say out loud, but I am going to say clearly because it is in the data and in the operational record. The Trophy Active Protection System, the system that Israel has spent decades developing, that has been cited globally as the gold standard of active tank protection, that has been adopted by the U.S. Army for its Abrams tanks, has a documented gap. And that gap is exactly the gap that Hezbollah, trained and equipped by Iran, has learned to exploit. In a single engagement on March 27th, a Hezbollah missile struck a Merkava of the 7th Brigade's 77th Battalion. The Times of Israel confirmed this. The IDF investigation found that the first missile was intercepted by Trophy. The second missile struck the tank and killed Sergeant Aviad Elchanan Volansky, 21 years old, from Jerusalem. Trophy stopped the first round. It did not stop the second. The saturation tactic, firing multiple projectiles in rapid sequence to overwhelm the intercept capacity of a system that requires a reset interval, is not new. Ukrainian and Russian forces developed it against each other's armor in 2022. Hezbollah observed it. Iranian commanders embedded in Hezbollah training operations after 2024 taught it, and now it is being applied against the IDF in southern Lebanon. The IDF cannot afford another failure of imagination. That is a direct quote from the Jerusalem Post. It is their own editorial board, their own analysis team, warning publicly that the IDF is at risk of repeating what happened on October 7th, paying for an adversary's innovation in blood rather than anticipating it first. If what is happening on the Lebanese front right now is reaching you differently than what you have been reading in the mainstream coverage, that is exactly what this analysis is for, like this video. Share it with the people in your network trying to understand what is actually happening on the ground. Now let me talk about what the IDF actually controls and what that tells us. Because the gap between the stated objective and the operational reality of this campaign is the constraint that is going to determine what happens next. Israel's stated objective in Lebanon since March 24 has been to create a security buffer zone extending from the border to the Litani River. The Litani is approximately 30 kilometers north of the Israeli border. As of this analysis, based on open source mapping and the Wikipedia operational record of the 2026 Lebanon War, Israeli forces control approximately 208.5 square kilometers of Lebanese territory. That is roughly 2% of Lebanon's total land area. They have been operating with 5 divisions for over a month. 5 divisions. And they control 2% of the country. Not the entire buffer zone they declared, not the Litani, 2%. Voices inside Israel are already calling publicly for a scaling back of war objectives. The Jerusalem Post is reporting internal debate about whether to reduce the buffer zone target from 30 kilometers to 3. That is a 90% reduction in stated military ambition from the moment Israel launched this operation. This is not a military that is winning decisively. This is a military that is grinding against an adversary in terrain specifically designed over decades to resist exactly this kind of conventional armored assault. That reality shows up in your cost of living. It shows up in your insurance premiums if you operate any business with exposure to Middle East shipping lanes. It shows up in the American strategic calculus as the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne, one of the most elite rapid deployment units in the world, is now being prepared for additional deployment to the Middle East, according to Reuters, as tens of thousands of additional U.S. troops are reportedly being positioned in the region. Washington is spending money, moving soldiers, and watching a ceasefire it brokered with Iran on April 7th get publicly undermined by the Israeli government's insistence that Lebanon is not included. That creates a constraint on American credibility that has real cost. When the U.S. can negotiate a ceasefire on one front and have its ally immediately ignore it on the adjacent front, every future diplomatic signal Washington sends anywhere in the world becomes slightly less credible. That is not a commentary. That is what happens structurally when commitments break publicly. Let me give you the honest constraint analysis here, because presenting only the side that makes Hezbollah look invincible would be exactly the kind of one-sided analysis I criticize in other outlets. The IDF has killed approximately 1,400 Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon in 45 days. That is real attrition. Those are real operational losses for Hezbollah. The IDF has destroyed hundreds of weapons storage sites, tunnels, command posts, and manufacturing facilities that Hezbollah spent years building in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem lost his nephew and personal secretary Ali Yusuf Harshi in an IDF strike on Beirut on April 8th. That was a real intelligence and organizational blow. The IDF has effectively encircled Bint Jbeil, Hezbollah's symbolic stronghold, the town where Nasrallah gave his famous spiderweb speech in 2000, calling Israel fragile, is now surrounded by IDF forces. The symbolism of that geographic fact is not nothing. It matters to the domestic Israeli political audience, and it matters to how this campaign gets described when negotiations eventually come. But here is the constraint that the IDF cannot resolve by killing more fighters. Hezbollah does not need to hold Bint Jbeil to win this campaign. It only needs to make the cost of holding it prohibitively high. And the introduction of optically guided drones on April 14th, the continued saturation ATGM tactics that Trophy has not fully solved, the fiber optic FPV attacks on Namer vehicles that carry Trophy but cannot defeat the top hatch approach, all of these represent costs that compound over time. Every new drone type Hezbollah deploys requires Israel to develop a new countermeasure. That development cycle takes months. The deployment cycle for Hezbollah is weeks. The rate of tactical innovation favors the defender in broken urban terrain. Here is where this resolves into the specific near-term decisions that are going to determine the operational outcome. Path 1. Israel establishes a meaningful buffer zone south of the Litani River before U.S. pressure and the ongoing Iran ceasefire negotiations force a settlement that includes Lebanon. In this scenario, the IDF absorbs the drone and ATGM attrition, accepts the tank losses, and establishes a physical security cordon that it then tries to maintain with a smaller permanent force. The problem with this path is that maintaining a security cordon in southern Lebanon against a reconstituted Hezbollah that has now demonstrated it can introduce new drone technologies faster than the IDF can develop countermeasures, requires permanent, costly military presence, the same presence that bled out in 1982, the same presence that ended in withdrawal in 2000. Path 2. The Lebanon front becomes a negotiating chip. Iran insists Lebanon must be included in any final ceasefire. The U.S. eventually agrees. Israel is forced to accept a buffer zone smaller than declared and a negotiated Hezbollah withdrawal that leaves the group intact north of the Litani. In this scenario, Bint Jbeil was encircled and partially controlled, but the campaign objective, the Litani buffer zone, was not achieved. The IDF withdraws. Hezbollah rebuilds. The same cycle begins again, except now Hezbollah has demonstrated it can produce optically guided drones that Israeli electronic warfare cannot defeat, and every future confrontation starts from that technological baseline. Path 3, the one I think is most dangerous and most likely to be misread by all parties. The ceasefire with Iran holds on paper while Israel continues operations in Lebanon. The U.S. allows this because Netanyahu and Trump have a specific political relationship that tolerates Israeli escalation. And then, Hezbollah, having deployed its new drone technology on April 14th, uses it not against a Merkava tank in a border corridor, but against a fixed Israeli military installation. Not in southern Lebanon, in northern Israel. Tel Aviv does not panic because of a tank being hit in a corridor outside Bint Jbeil. Tel Aviv panics because an optically guided drone that cannot be jammed navigates through an urban area and hits an IDF headquarters building in Haifa, or strikes a military installation in Kiryat Shmona that cannot be evacuated. That is the scenario that breaks the current managed escalation. That is the scenario that forces Washington to either let Israel respond massively in a way that collapses the Iran ceasefire, or pressure Israel to stop in a way that ends Netanyahu's government. Neither of those choices is comfortable. Both are now on the table. Here are the predictions I want you to mark and return to. The first is operational and will be testable within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Hezbollah will use its optically guided drone again, not in a field engagement in southern Lebanon, but against a fixed Israeli military or intelligence installation inside the Green Line. The targeting logic is clear. You do not deploy a new guidance technology against a moving tank in a kill corridor when you can demonstrate range and precision against a hardened target inside Israel that cannot be moved or hidden. The second prediction is structural and will be testable within the next month. The United States will formally and publicly intervene to press Israel to accept a Lebanon ceasefire as a condition for any sustainable regional settlement, overriding the Israeli position that Lebanon is a separate operational theater. The pressure mechanism will be the Iran ceasefire timeline. The April 22nd deadline for the next round of U.S.-Iran negotiations creates a forcing function. Washington cannot negotiate a durable Iran arrangement while its ally is conducting the largest airstrikes of the war in a country that Iran has stated must be included in any deal. This contradiction does not resolve by ignoring it. It resolves by resolution or by collapse. The third prediction is the one that I believe will define the strategic legacy of this entire period. Within 6 months, the fiber optic FPV drone and optically guided navigation system will be deployed by actors not currently in this conflict. The proliferation pathway is not theoretical. It follows the same trajectory as every tactical innovation from the Ukraine war. It moves from one conflict to adjacent conflicts within months, not years. Iranian manufacturing infrastructure, the same infrastructure the IDF has struck over 600 times in ballistic missile sites, but has not dismantled in the drone production and export sector, is still producing and distributing. The drone that hit the Merkava turret on April 5th. The drone that evaded IDF electronic warfare on April 14th. These are not unique prototypes, they are production items. And the fact that the IDF cannot yet stop them in deployed combat operations means every actor watching this conflict closely is drawing the same conclusion about the gap that exists between Israeli armored doctrine and the threat environment it now faces. I want to close with the image I opened with, because it matters that we return to it clearly and precisely. An 11-second clip, a drone descending, a Merkava Mark IV, $3.5 million, 40 tons of layered steel and composite armor, active protection system, combat proven in 3 decades of engagement, the drone descending onto the top hatch, the clip ending. That is the tactical picture, but here's the strategic picture underneath it. That drone cost, according to operational estimates of comparable FPV systems, somewhere between $300 and $800. The ratio between the cost of the weapon and the cost of the target is not $300 to $3.5 million. The ratio is the cost of the entire anti-armor campaign against the cost of a ground operation that has stalled at 2% of its territorial objective after 45 days with 5 divisions and the most sophisticated armored equipment Israel has ever deployed. The drones that Iran designed, transferred, and refined through Hezbollah's training cycle have reached a level of operational effectiveness that the IDF publicly acknowledges it has not yet solved. And on April 14th, a new version of that technology appeared for the first time that removes the last countermeasure Israel had left to deploy. That is not a tactical defeat, not yet, but it is the precondition for one. And somewhere right now, in an IDF operations center, in a Pentagon planning cell, in an Iranian drone production facility still running, despite 600 Israeli strikes on ballistic missile infrastructure, the next move in this sequence is already being calculated. Tell me in the comments what you think happens when Hezbollah uses that optically guided system inside Israeli territory. Not on a tank in a kill corridor, but against a fixed installation that Israeli civilians can see burning. Tell me if you think the ceasefire holds when that happens. I am reading every single comment and tracking every development as this unfolds. Subscribe now. Share this with every person in your network trying to understand why the most protected tank in the Western world is losing its armor advantage in the hills of southern Lebanon to a weapon that costs less than a used car. Turn on notifications. This is not over. And the next development is closer than anyone in official channels is telling you.